I can't feel my legs. For real this time. Disabled Vet Disarms 3. Robbers, but his secret shocked everyone. What happens when a wheelchair-bound homeless veteran suddenly takes down 3 armed bank robbers in just seconds? When security footage of Jack Wheels Morrison disarming dangerous criminals goes viral, the world discovers this isn't just any homeless man. He's a decorated Navy SEAL with a devastating secret. As the media frenzy explodes and a crime boss seeks revenge, Jack must confront the ghosts of a classified mission that left him pretending to be paralyzed for 5 years. But when those who try to help him become targets and his real paralysis begins to return, Jack faces an impossible choice: stay hidden and survive, or risk everything to save the people who believed in him. This is a story of invisible heroes, the price of sacrifice, and the moment when a forgotten warrior must rise one last time, even if he can never stand again. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of courage and redemption. Your support means everything to us. The December wind cut through Manhattan's financial district like a blade, carrying with it the smell of exhaust fumes and distant snow. Outside the First National Bank of New York, pressed against the cold granite wall where the building's heating vents offered meager warmth, Jack Morrison adjusted the cardboard sign propped against his wheelchair. The letters, written in shaking script with a worn Sharpie, read simply, "Disabled vet, anything helps. God bless." His weathered face, hidden beneath a week's worth of gray-streaked beard and a faded Yankees cap pulled low, bore the kind of lines that spoke of sand, sun, and decisions no man should have to make. His eyes, though steel gray and perpetually scanning, belonged to someone who'd never truly left the battlefield. The metal cup attached to his wheelchair's armrest held exactly $3.47 in change, carefully arranged to make the right sound when generous souls dropped their offerings. Too much money invited trouble. Too little suggested he wasn't worth helping. Jack had learned to maintain the perfect balance of desperation and dignity that made people feel good about tossing him their spare quarters. It was 2:47 p.m. when everything changed. The bank's heavy glass doors exploded outward with such force that Jack instinctively ducked his hands, moving to protect his face in a motion so fluid it betrayed years of muscle memory. 3 men burst through the entrance, ski masks pulled tight over their faces, duffel bags heavy with stolen cash clutched in their hands. The lead robber, tall and wiry, held a Glock 19 high in the air. The second, broader and moving with the confidence of hired muscle, had his arm wrapped around a young woman's throat. She clutched a baby to her chest, the infant's cries piercing through the chaos of screaming pedestrians and wailing sirens still blocks away. The third robber, smaller and clearly nervous, kept glancing back at the bank as if expecting pursuit that hadn't materialized yet. His hands shook as he gripped a sawed-off shotgun, the barrel swinging wildly as he tried to cover too many angles at once. "Move, everyone, get back!" The leader's voice cracked with adrenaline and desperation. "Anyone tries to be a hero, the woman and kid are dead." The crowd scattered like leaves before a storm, people diving behind cars, fleeing into nearby shops, pressing themselves flat against buildings. Everyone ran except Jack Morrison, who remained exactly where he'd been for the past 6 hours, seemingly frozen in his wheelchair, his cup of change rattling softly in the wind. The woman, Rebecca Chen, though Jack didn't know her name yet, locked eyes with him for a fraction of a second. In that moment, he saw not just fear, but a mother's primal terror for her child. The baby, no more than 6 months old, had stopped crying, as if sensing the danger. Rebecca's designer suit was torn at the shoulder where the robber had grabbed her, her usually perfect composure shattered into raw desperation. "Please, Jack," called out, his voice cracking with practiced weakness. "Please, sir, I need help. My medication. I haven't eaten." He rolled his wheelchair forward slightly, the wheels squeaking on the cold pavement. "Just $1, please." The nervous robber with the shotgun spun toward him. "Get back, old man! You deaf!" But Jack kept rolling forward, his head down, mumbling incoherently about veterans' affairs and missed appointments, playing the role of the broken soldier lost in his own deteriorating mind. It was a performance he'd perfected over 5 years of hiding in plain sight. "I said get back!" The nervous robber stepped toward Jack's shotgun, rising. "Wait!" the leader barked. "Leave him! He's nobody! Just some worthless—" Jack's cup of change hit the ground with a crash that drew everyone's attention. Quarters and dimes scattered across the sidewalk in a spray of silver. The nervous robber, already on edge, instinctively looked down at the rolling coins. 3 seconds. That's all Jack needed. His hands shot out with the speed of a striking snake, grabbing the shotgun's barrel and yanking it down and to the left. The robber's finger, already on the trigger, squeezed reflexively. The blast tore a chunk from the sidewalk where Jack's wheelchair had been a moment before, because Jack was no longer there. In one fluid motion that defied every law of physics governing paralyzed legs, Jack had rolled backward while pulling the robber forward and off balance. His right hand, still gripping the shotgun barrel, twisted sharply. The crack of breaking fingers was audible even over the robber's scream. The weapon clattered to the ground as Jack's left hand found the man's throat, applying pressure to the carotid artery with surgical precision. The robber dropped unconscious in under 2 seconds. The leader spun toward the commotion, his Glock swinging around, but Jack was already moving. From his wheelchair's side pouch, where most people would keep water bottles or medications, Jack produced 3 heavy coins. Not quarters or half dollars, but challenge coins, thick and weighted, earned in places whose names were still classified. The first coin caught the leader in the wrist, the impact precise enough to damage the median nerve. His hands spasmed, the Glock tumbling from nerveless fingers. The second coin struck his knee, dropping him to one leg. The third would have hit his temple, but Jack held it back. Even now, even after everything, he avoided killing when he could. The muscular robber holding Rebecca had watched his partners fall in less than 5 seconds. His arm tightened around her throat, using her as a shield, as he backed toward the street where their getaway van waited, engine running. "Stay back, I'll kill her. I'll kill them both." Jack's eyes never left the man's face as he reached down to his wheelchair's wheels. His fingers found the quick-release pins he'd installed years ago, modifications that had nothing to do with maintenance and everything to do with turning any object into a weapon. "You're holding her wrong," Jack said quietly, his voice carrying despite the sirens growing closer. Gone was the quavering tone of the broken vagrant. This voice belonged to someone else entirely, someone who'd been buried under 5 years of cardboard signs and calculated desperation. "Your elbow's too high. She could break free if she knew how. Lucky for you, she doesn't." "Shut up. Just shut up and stay back." Rebecca's eyes found Jack's again. This time he saw something beyond fear. A flicker of hope, maybe, or recognition that the homeless veteran in the wheelchair was something more than he appeared. Jack's hands moved so fast they seemed to blur. The wheel came off its axis, spinning through the air like a discus. It struck the robber's shoulder with enough force to spin him partially around, loosening his grip on Rebecca just enough. She reacted instinctively, dropping her weight and twisting away while clutching her baby protectively. The robber tried to grab her again, but Jack had already launched himself from his wheelchair. The sight of a supposedly paralyzed man diving through the air caused several onlookers to gasp, their phones capturing every impossible second. Jack's shoulder caught the robber in the solar plexus, driving him backward into the bank's granite steps. They hit the ground hard, but Jack had positioned himself to take the brunt of the impact. Old habits of protecting assets, even criminal ones, dying hard. The robber tried to fight back, but it was like trying to wrestle water. Jack flowed around every attack, his hands finding pressure points with an accuracy that spoke of countless hours of training. Within seconds, the robber was face down on the sidewalk, his arms twisted behind him in a hold that would dislocate both shoulders if he so much as breathed wrong. "Don't move," Jack whispered in his ear. "Trust me, you don't want to know what comes next if you move." The sirens were deafening now, police cars screeching to a halt in a semicircle around the scene. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped into chaos. Jack slowly raised his hand, still kneeling on the robber's back. "Friendly," he called out, using terminology that made several officers pause. 3 suspects down, no casualties, situation contained. Detective Mike Torres was the first to holster his weapon, approaching cautiously. He was a 20-year veteran with the kind of gut that spoke of too many late-night stakeouts fueled by coffee and donuts. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He took in the scene. 3 armed robbers neutralized a homeless veteran in a wheelchair that he'd somehow abandoned, a terrified woman clutching a baby, and his expression shifted from confusion to something like recognition. "Holy hell, Torres muttered. Then louder, "Get those cuffs on them, and somebody get the paramedics over here." As officers swarmed the robbers, Jack tried to retreat to his wheelchair, but his legs, which had performed impossibly just moments before, suddenly buckled. He caught himself on the chair's frame, breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead despite the December cold. Rebecca approached slowly, her baby still crying softly against her chest. You saved us. How did you? She looked at the wheelchair, then at Jack's legs, confusion evident in her voice. I don't understand. Ma'am, you should get checked by the paramedics, Jack said, not meeting her eyes. His voice had returned to the raspy tone of the homeless veteran, but Rebecca had heard the change the moment when someone else had spoken through this broken man's lips. What's your name? She asked. Jack hesitated. Behind Rebecca, he could see news vans already arriving, reporters and cameras spilling out like hungry wolves scenting blood. Someone's cell phone video was probably already uploading to social media, about to turn his carefully maintained anonymity into digital wildfire. Jack, he said finally. Just Jack. Detective Torres stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Jack Morrison, he said quietly, and it wasn't a question. Captain Jack Morrison, Navy SEAL Team 8. Jack's hands tightened on his wheelchair's handles. You're mistaken, detective. I'm nobody, just another broken vet trying to survive. Torres pulled out his phone, showing Jack a grainy photograph from what looked like a military database. The man in the image was younger, cleaner, standing tall in dress blues with a chest full of medals that most people couldn't even name. But the eyes were the same steel gray and always watching. Operation Thunderstrike, Torres said, his voice barely above a whisper. Syria 2018. You've been listed as KIA for 5 years, Captain. Your memorial service had full honors. The president himself signed your commendation. The blood drained from Jack's face. Around them, the crowd was growing. Phones raised, everyone recording the aftermath of what social media was already calling the miracle on 42nd Street. Someone had zoomed in on Jack's face, and facial recognition software was already working its digital magic across 1,000 servers. You need to get out of here, Jack said urgently to Torres. All of you need to clear the area. You don't understand what you've just... The shot came from nowhere and everywhere at once, the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoing off the glass and steel canyon of Manhattan's skyscrapers. The bullet struck the concrete inches from Jack's wheelchair, sending chips of sidewalk into the air like shrapnel. Sniper! Jack roared, his voice carrying the authority of command despite his supposed disability. Everyone down, northwest corner, third floor window. The crowd scattered in panic. Officers drew their weapons, looking for a target they couldn't see. Detective Torres threw himself over Rebecca and her baby, shielding them with his body. But Jack remained where he was, sitting in his wheelchair, in the middle of the chaos, a perfect target. The second shot never came. Instead, Jack's phone, a battered flip phone that looked like it belonged in a museum, buzzed with an incoming text. The number was blocked, but Jack knew who it was from. He'd been dreading this message for 5 years. Phoenix rises, thunder strikes twice. You have 48 hours. Jack closed the phone slowly, his mind already calculating distances, angles, escape routes. But as he looked around at the chaos he'd caused by simply acting on instinct, by choosing to save instead of staying hidden, he realized the bitter truth: there was nowhere left to run. The security footage from the bank's external cameras had captured everything in crystal clear HD. By the time the first news van went live, the video had already been leaked by someone inside the bank. Someone who'd recognized an opportunity when they saw one. The footage showed every impossible move, every moment that proved the paralyzed homeless veteran was anything but disabled. This is Jennifer Walsh reporting live from First National Bank, where just moments ago, a homeless veteran in a wheelchair single-handedly stopped 3 armed robbers in what witnesses are calling nothing short of miraculous. The reporter's voice faded into white noise as Jack watched his carefully constructed cover story crumble in real time. 5 years of patient hiding, of calculated invisibility, destroyed in 3 seconds of muscle memory and moral instinct. Rebecca knelt beside his wheelchair, her baby finally quiet in her arms. Whatever you're running from, she said softly, it can't be worse than letting innocent people die. You did the right thing. Jack looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Asian features mixed with something else, maybe Irish from her father's side. Wedding ring on her finger but worn, suggesting long absence. The baby had her mother's eyes but someone else's nose, someone who should be here protecting them but wasn't. You don't know what I've done, Jack said quietly. The right thing, I haven't done the right thing in so long, I've forgotten what it looks like. Before Rebecca could respond, a black SUV roared around the corner tires, screaming against asphalt. It mounted the curb, scattering the remaining crowd, and skidded to a stop just feet from Jack's wheelchair. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, tall, elegant, despite the tactical gear, with the kind of beauty that could stop traffic, or in this case had just caused it. Dar Elizabeth Harper looked exactly as she had 5 years ago, the day Jack had died in Syria. The same honey-colored hair, now pulled back in a tactical bun. The same green eyes that had once looked at him with love, now filled with something between relief and fury. The same wedding ring on her finger, the match to the one Jack still wore on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath layers of dirty clothes. "Hello, Jack," she said, and her voice carried the weight of 5 years of grief, anger, and a love that apparently hadn't died with his supposed death. "We need to talk." Detective Torres stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon. "Ma'am, this is an active crime scene. You need to—" Elizabeth held up a badge that made Torres step back immediately. The letters were subtle but unmistakable, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. "This man is coming with me, Detective. National Security." "Like hell he is," Torres replied, surprising everyone with his defiance. "This man just stopped 3 armed robbers and saved 2 lives. He's a hero, not a criminal." Elizabeth's laugh was bitter. "A hero? You have no idea who you're defending, Detective." She turned to Jack, and her professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw pain underneath. "Tell him, Jack. Tell him about Thunderstrike. Tell him about the 12 soldiers who didn't come home because of your heroism." The crowd, which had been gradually creeping closer, went silent. Even the reporters stopped their chattering, sensing a story bigger than a simple robbery. Jack's hands tightened on his wheelchair's arms until his knuckles went white. "Liz, don't what? Don't tell the truth. Isn't that what you always said was most important, the truth no matter the cost?" "Dr. Harper," Jack said, and the formality of it made her flinch. "There are shooters in play, probably more than one. This location is compromised. Whatever you think you're doing here—" "What I'm doing," Elizabeth interrupted, "is saving your life, again, because apparently you have a death wish that even fake paralysis couldn't cure." She reached into the SUV and pulled out a tablet, turning it toward Jack. The screen showed a satellite image of their current location, red dots indicating positions around the perimeter. 6 shooters, all with clear lines of sight on this position. "They've been waiting for you to surface for 5 years, Jack. And thanks to your little heroic display, they know exactly where you are." Rebecca, who had been silent through this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Who are you people? What is this about?" Elizabeth looked at her with something like pity. "You're Rebecca Chen, aren't you? Wife of Sergeant David Chen, Marine Corps, currently listed as missing in action." Rebecca's face went pale. What do you know about David?" "I know," Elizabeth said slowly, her eyes never leaving Jack's face, "that your husband was part of Operation Thunderstrike. I know that Captain Morrison here was his commanding officer, and I know that Jack was the only one who made it back alive." The baby in Rebecca's arms began to cry again, as if sensing the sudden tension. Rebecca's voice shook as she spoke. "They told me David was MIA, that there was still hope." "There's always hope," Jack said quietly, finally meeting her eyes. "That's what they tell the families. It's easier than the truth." "Jack," Elizabeth warned, but he continued, "Your husband is alive, Mrs. Chen. At least he was 6 months ago." The tablet in Elizabeth's hands cracked as her grip tightened. "Jack, shut up. You're violating—" "I'm violating nothing," Jack snapped, and for a moment the broken, homeless veteran was completely gone, replaced by someone used to command. "I'm dead, remember, dead men can't violate national security." Detective Torres had been listening to all of this with growing confusion and anger. "Someone better start making sense right now, or I'm arresting everyone and sorting it out downtown." A new voice cut through the tension, young and excited. "Holy crap, the video's already got 2 million views." Everyone turned to see a teenager holding up his phone, oblivious to the drama he'd just interrupted. On the screen, the security footage played on loop. Jack rising from his wheelchair, taking down 3 armed men with impossible grace, the headline reading, "Homeless Hero or Hidden Warrior, Disabled Vets, Impossible Takedown," goes viral. Elizabeth closed her eyes in frustration. And there goes operational security. She turned to Jack. You have two choices. Come with me now, and maybe we can contain this. Or stay here and wait for them to put a bullet through your skull. Your heroic rescue will be remembered as the day you got yourself and probably a dozen civilians killed in the crossfire. Jack looked around at the crowd at the cameras at Rebecca still processing the bombshell about her husband. His eyes found the three robbers being loaded into police cars. The one whose arm he'd broken was conscious now, staring at Jack with something between fear and rage. But it wasn't the look of a common criminal who'd been caught. It was the look of a professional who'd had his mission disrupted. They weren't really robbing the bank, Jack said, suddenly the pieces falling into place. This was a setup. You knew I was here. Elizabeth's expression didn't change, but Jack had known her long enough to read the truth in the slight tightening around her eyes. 5 years, Liz. 5 years I've stayed hidden, stayed dead. Why now? Because, a new voice said from behind them, causing everyone to spin around, the dead have a nasty habit of coming back when you least expect them. The man standing there wore an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the prison tattoos crawling up his neck. Vincent Viper Caruso looked like a businessman until you saw his eyes flat reptilian, devoid of anything resembling human warmth. Behind him stood 4 men, who definitely weren't businessmen, their hands hovering near barely concealed weapons. Mr. Morrison, Viper said with a smile that never reached his eyes, you just put my son in the hospital with a shattered arm and severe nerve damage. The doctors say he may never have full use of his hand again. He tilted his head slightly. That's unfortunate. He's a pianist, you see, or was. Detective Torres had his weapon half drawn. Caruso, you take one more step. Detective Torres, Viper said pleasantly, I'm just a concerned father visiting the scene where his son was brutally assaulted. Nothing illegal about that. His eyes never left Jack. Besides, I think Mr. Morrison and I have business to discuss. Old business, from before his death. Jack felt the world closing in around him. Elizabeth on one side with the government's leash. Viper on the other with revenge in his heart. Above them, snipers waited for clear shots. And in the middle of it all, Rebecca Chen, holding a baby whose father might be alive or dead, depending on which truth Jack chose to tell. The wheelchair felt like a prop, now the disguise pointless. But his legs, his real legs, not the ones he'd been faking, were starting to tremble. The exertion of the fight, the adrenaline crash, and something else. Something that had been getting worse over the past few months made his knees weak. The chemical exposure in Syria hadn't been a cover story. It had been real, just delayed a time bomb in his nervous system waiting for the right trigger. As if sensing his weakness, Elizabeth stepped closer. Jack, you're pale. When's the last time you took the inhibitors? What inhibitors? He asked, though they both knew he was lying. The ones that have been keeping the paralysis at bay. The ones I've been leaving at the drop point every month, which you've been ignoring for the past 3 months. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's getting worse, isn't it? The real paralysis, not the act. Before Jack could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, but a video call from an unlisted number. Against his better judgment, knowing it was probably a trap, Jack answered. The face that appeared on the screen made Rebecca gasp and drop to her knees. Hello, Captain, David Chen said from what looked like a concrete cell. He was thinner than his photos, bruised but alive. I hear you've been taking care of my wife and daughter. We need to talk about that. The video call ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving David Chen's haggard face burned into everyone's retinas like a ghost image. Rebecca remained on her knees, clutching her baby, their baby, as tears streamed down her face. The infant, barely 6 months old, reached out toward the now dark phone screen, as if sensing her father's presence through the digital void. David, Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. Oh God, David. Jack forced himself to remain steady in his wheelchair, though his legs were now trembling violently beneath the blanket he had hastily pulled over them. The tremors weren't from exertion or adrenaline anymore. The chemical agent designated XK-47 that had been slowly eating away at his nervous system for 5 years was accelerating its work, triggered by the intense physical activity of the fight. Elizabeth noticed immediately. She always noticed everything about him, even after 5 years of supposed death. Her hand moved toward him instinctively before she caught herself maintaining the professional distance she'd adopted since stepping out of that SUV. We need to move, she said sharply, addressing everyone but looking at Jack. This location is compromised 6 ways from Sunday. Detective Torres, I'm invoking federal jurisdiction. Clear the area now. Torres, who'd been staring at the phone in shock, snapped back to cop mode. You heard her, everyone back. Move the perimeter too. The explosion cut him off. The coffee shop, 3 storefronts down, erupted in a ball of flame and shattered glass. The shockwave knocked several people to the ground, car alarms screaming in response. Through the smoke and chaos, Jack saw them figures in tactical gear, moving with military precision, using the explosion as cover to advance on their position. Contact front! Jack shouted, old instincts overriding everything else. Elizabeth, get Rebecca and the baby to your vehicle. Torres, you're 3 o'clock. The detective spun just in time to see a red laser dot painting his chest. Jack's thrown challenge coin, his last one, struck the shooter's scope, sending the shot wide. The bullet sparked off the concrete where Torres had been standing a second before. Viper Caruso hadn't moved during the explosion. He stood calmly in the chaos, lighting a cigarette, as if watching a mildly interesting street performance. You should have stayed dead, Morrison, he said conversationally. My son might be crippled, but he'll live. These men, they have orders to leave no witnesses. Your son wasn't robbing a bank, Jack said, even as he scanned for exits, for options, for anything that might get the civilians out alive. He was there to draw me out. You knew I'd intervene. Viper's smile was cold. The government isn't the only one who's been watching you, Captain. 5 years of playing homeless. Please. We've known where you were for the last 3. He took a dren from his cigarette. But you were useful where you were until Elizabeth here decided to activate you again. I didn't activate anything, Elizabeth protested, but her denial rang hollow. Jack laughed bitterly. No. Then explain how 3 robbers just happened to take hostages right where I've been sitting for 6 months. Explain how you arrived within minutes of the incident. Explain how David Chen, who's been MIA for 5 years, suddenly has access to a phone and my number. The tactical team was closing in using cars as cover, leapfrogging with practiced efficiency. These weren't street thugs or even standard military. Jack recognized the movement patterns, the hand signals. These were contractors, probably former special forces, the kind money could buy if you had enough of it. 30 seconds until they're in range, Jack said quietly. Liz, whatever play you're running now would be the time. Elizabeth pulled out a small device that looked like a car key fob. Everyone close your eyes and cover your ears. Now. The electromagnetic pulse was invisible but devastating. Every electronic device within a 3-block radius died instantly. Phones, cameras, cars, even the traffic lights. The tactical team's night vision and communications went dark, leaving them temporarily blind and deaf. In the sudden electronic silence, Jack heard something else, the distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of helicopter rotors. A black helicopter rose from behind the nearest skyscraper like a mechanical angel of death. No running lights, no identification markers. That's our ride, Elizabeth said, already pulling Rebecca to her feet. We have maybe 2 minutes before they adapt. But Jack wasn't moving. He sat in his wheelchair, looking at Viper with an expression of sudden understanding. You're not here for revenge about your son. Viper dropped his cigarette, crushing it under his Italian leather shoe. Clever to the end, Captain. No, my son was simply bait. You see, I have a problem. 12 problems, actually. 12 soldiers who know too much about my operations. 12 witnesses who could destroy everything I've built. The missing soldiers from Thunderstrike, Torres said, finally putting pieces together. You're holding them. Holding implies they're prisoners, Viper corrected. They're employees now. Unwilling perhaps, but employees nonetheless. Amazing what men will do when you have leverage. Family members, for instance. Children. Wives who think they're widows. Rebecca made a sound like a wounded animal. You bastard. You've had David for 5 years. 3 years, Viper corrected. The government had him for the first 2. Ask Dr. Harper about that. Ask her about Project Phoenix and the chemical weapons tests. Ask her why her husband, her supposedly dead husband, was the only one to walk away from Thunderstrike. The helicopter was hovering now, a rope ladder dropping. Elizabeth grabbed Rebecca's arm. We need to go, now. But Rebecca pulled away, turning to Jack with eyes full of rage and pain. Is it true? Did you leave them behind? Did you leave David behind? Jack's hands gripped the wheels of his chair so tightly the rubber creaked. It's complicated. Complicated. Rebecca's voice rose to nearly a scream. My daughter has never met her father because it's complicated. The tactical team had recovered from the EMP switching to iron sights and hand signals. They were moving again, tightening the noose. Jack could see at least 12 of them now, plus whatever snipers were still in position. Jack, Elizabeth said urgently, we have to. I can't, Jack said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. My legs, the paralysis. It's real now. I can't climb that ladder. Elizabeth's professional mask finally cracked completely. What? But you just... The inhibitors only work for so long, Jack explained, his voice clinically detached. Every time I push through the paralysis force my legs to work, the chemical damage accelerates. That fight with the robbers, he gestured at his unresponsive legs. That was probably the last time I'll ever walk. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through a loudspeaker. 30 seconds to bingo fuel. We leave in 30 seconds with or without you. Torres made a decision. I'll carry him. You'll be dead before you take 3 steps, Viper said. My men have orders. Morrison doesn't leave here alive. Then we all die here, Elizabeth said, pulling out a Glock from under her tactical vest. Because I'm not leaving him again. The word again hung in the air like a confession. Jack looked up at his wife because that's what she still was. Papers or no papers, death certificate or no death certificate, and saw 5 years of guilt written across her face. You knew, he said softly. You knew I was alive the whole time. Of course I knew, she snapped. I helped fake your death, remember? It was supposed to be temporary. 6 months undercover to expose the trafficking ring. But you just disappeared, became this. She gestured at his wheelchair, his homeless persona with disgust. Gave up. I uncovered things that couldn't be exposed, Jack said. Things that went all the way to... The first shot cracked across the plaza, then another and another, but they weren't aimed at Jack's group. The tactical team was taking fire from the surrounding buildings, muzzle flashes lighting up windows like deadly fireflies. Through the chaos, Jack heard a familiar voice on a megaphone. This is the United States Marine Corps, stand down or be fired upon. Marines in full combat gear repelled from the surrounding buildings, engaging Viper's contractors with overwhelming firepower. It was a textbook ambush, perfectly executed. Within seconds, the contractors were either down or surrendering. Viper stood in the middle of the firefight, untouched, unmoving, like he'd expected this all along. Impressive, Dr. Harper. You brought the Marines. I didn't bring anyone, Elizabeth said, looking as confused as everyone else. A figure emerged from the smoke wearing Marine dress blues despite the combat situation. Colonel James Patterson, gray-haired and bearing the kind of scars that spoke of too many wars, walked through the battlefield like he was strolling through a park. Captain Morrison, he said, stopping in front of Jack's wheelchair and saluting. Or should I say Major Morrison? Your promotion came through while you were dead. Jack didn't return the salute. Colonel Patterson, still cleaning up messes, I see. Still making them, I see, Patterson replied. He turned to Viper. Mr. Caruso, you're under arrest for kidnapping, human trafficking, and about 30 other charges we'll figure out later. Viper laughed. You can't arrest me, Colonel. I have diplomatic immunity. Venezuelan embassy issued just this morning. He pulled out a passport, the diplomatic seal clearly visible. Besides, without those 12 soldiers to testify, you have nothing. About that, Patterson said, pulling out a tablet. He turned it toward the group, showing a satellite feed of a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As they watched, the doors burst open and Marines poured in. The feed switched to helmet cams, showing soldiers in cells alive, thin, but breathing. We've been tracking your operations for months, Caruso. Captain Morrison's little performance today was just the distraction we needed. Jack felt the world tilt. This was all planned, the robbery, the hostages. Not the hostages, Patterson admitted, looking at Rebecca with something like regret. That was Caruso going off script. We didn't know he had your husband, Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry. Rebecca was beyond words, clutching her baby and staring at the screen where Marines were cutting the locks on her husband's cell. David Chen stumbled out, blinking in the harsh light, calling out for his wife and daughter he'd never met. He's alive, she whispered. He's really alive. They're all alive, Patterson confirmed. Malnourished, traumatized, but alive. Except, he paused, looking at Jack. Except for Lieutenant Michael Harper, Elizabeth's brother. He died 3 years ago trying to escape. Caruso had him executed as an example to the others. Elizabeth's Glock slipped from nerveless fingers clattering on the concrete. Michael, but you said... The reports said he died in thunderstrike. We say a lot of things in reports, Patterson said gently. Your brother died a hero, Dr. Harper. He gave us the intel that led us to the others. His sacrifice saved 11 lives. Jack reached for Elizabeth's hand, but she pulled away her face, a mask of rage and grief. You all knew he was alive after thunderstrike, and you let me think he was dead. We thought he was dead, Jack said quietly. The chemical attack at the compound. When I went back for them, there were no survivors. Or so I thought. Caruso's men must have grabbed them in the chaos before the airstrike. The airstrike you called in, Elizabeth accused. You left them behind and called in an airstrike. I called in the strike because the chemical weapons were about to be deployed on a city of 2 million people. Jack said, his voice steady despite the pain in his legs and heart. It was 12 lives against 2 million. I made the call. The right call, Patterson added. The chemicals at that compound would have made sarin gas look like tear gas. Captain Morrison saved countless lives that day. And destroyed 12 others, Jack countered. They were my men, my responsibility. I should have found another way. Detective Torres, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke. So this whole thing, the robbery, the viral video, all of it, was to draw out Caruso? Partially, Patterson admitted. We knew Caruso was holding our men, but we didn't know where. We also knew he had an obsession with Captain Morrison. When Dr. Harper reported that Morrison's real paralysis was advancing, we knew we had to act soon. So we activated the plan. Without telling me, Jack said bitterly. You would have refused, Patterson replied simply. Your sense of guilt would have made you try to handle it alone, again. The helicopter had landed now, medics rushing out with a stretcher. Jack didn't resist as they lifted him from his wheelchair, his legs completely unresponsive now. The chemical damage was irreversible, the doctors had said. Every minute he'd spent forcing his legs to work had been borrowed time, and the loan had finally come due. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, Viper, now in handcuffs, called out, This isn't over, Morrison. I have friends, people who remember what you did in Syria, what you really did. Jack met his eyes steadily. Let them come. I'll be easy to find. Can't exactly run anymore. The medics were about to load him into the helicopter when Rebecca approached, her baby in one arm, the other hand holding the phone showing David being treated by Marine medics. Thank you, she said simply, for saving us today, for trying to save him 5 years ago, for carrying this guilt alone. She placed a hand on his arm. David's alive because you made an impossible choice. My daughter has a father because you chose to act today even knowing it would cost you your legs. Jack's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 5 years. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home sooner. You're bringing him home now, Rebecca said. That's what matters. Elizabeth climbed into the helicopter beside Jack's stretcher, her face unreadable. We're not done, Jack. There's more to Thunderstrike than even you know. The chemical weapons project Phoenix, my brother's death, it's all connected to something bigger. Liz, Jack started, but she held up a hand. I'm still your emergency contact, she said quietly. Still your wife legally speaking. Death certificates can be reversed. But Jack, she looked at his paralyzed legs, then back at his face. The man I married would never have given up, never have hidden. What happened to you? Jack was quiet for a long moment as the helicopter lifted off Manhattan, shrinking below them. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible over the rotors. I found out who gave the order for Thunderstrike, who really wanted those chemicals deployed, who betrayed us all. Elizabeth leaned closer. Who? Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 5 years of secrets pressing down on him. Someone you trust, someone we all trust, someone who's about to become very interested in making sure I stay quiet. Before Elizabeth could demand more answers, Jack's phone, which should have been dead from the EMP, buzzed. The text was simple, just 3 words that changed everything. Welcome back, Phoenix. Below the text was a photo that made Jack's blood run cold. It showed Elizabeth's apartment, the one she thought was a secret, the one where she'd been hiding something for the past 3 years. In the window, clearly visible, was a child. A boy, maybe 4 years old, with Jack's gray eyes and Elizabeth's honey hair. Elizabeth saw the photo and grabbed Jack's hand, squeezing it so tight it hurt. "Jack, I can explain." "Is he mine?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," she whispered. "His name is Michael, after my brother. Born 8 months after you died. I couldn't tell anyone. If they knew you had a son, they'd use him as leverage," Jack finished, "like Caruso used the families of my men." He looked at the photo again, memorizing every detail of the son he'd never known existed. "Where is he now?" "Safe house in Vermont, maximum security. I visit when I can, but—" Elizabeth's voice broke. "He asks about his daddy. I tell him you're a hero who had to go away to keep us safe." "Not a lie," Jack said softly. "Not the whole truth either," Elizabeth countered. The helicopter banked sharply, heading not toward a hospital, but toward a military base. Jack recognized Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. As they descended, Jack could see vehicles waiting, medical teams, and something else, a full military honor guard. "What's this?" Jack asked. Patterson's voice came through the helicopter's intercom. "Your official resurrection, Major Morrison. The president wants to personally thank the hero who saved those soldiers." "The president?" Jack struggled to sit up, but his legs were dead weight. "Patterson, no. The moment I'm officially alive, everyone I've been investigating will know." They already know," Patterson interrupted. "That video has 50 million views and climbing. Someone leaked your service record. CNN's running a special on Operation Thunderstrike. The cat's not just out of the bag, Major. It's doing interviews on late-night TV." As the helicopter touched down, Jack saw news vans already gathered outside the base's gates. His story, or at least the version the public would be allowed to know, was about to become the biggest news in the country. But all Jack could think about was the photo of his son and the 3 words that accompanied it. Phoenix was more than his call sign. It was a project, a conspiracy that went deeper than trafficking or chemical weapons. And now that he was back from the dead, officially and publicly, those behind Phoenix would have to act. The game he'd been playing in the shadows for 5 years was over. The real war was about to begin, and this time he'd have to fight it from a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down, with a son he'd never met in danger and a wife who'd kept her own secrets. The medics wheeled him toward the waiting ambulances, but Jack grabbed the wheels, stopping them. "Wait!" He looked back at the helicopter, where Elizabeth stood watching him, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky the color of blood and fire. "Liz, him!" he called out, "and whatever happens next, protect Michael. Promise me." She nodded, unable to speak. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Jack's phone buzzed one more time. This message was longer, more detailed. It contained GPS coordinates, a timestamp for 48 hours from now, and a simple message. "Come alone, or your son dies. Come with backup, and your wife dies. Come prepared to finish what Thunderstrike started. Phoenix rises from the ashes of the old world. You can be part of the new one, or burn with the old. Choose wisely, Major Morrison." Jack deleted the message and closed his eyes. 48 hours to save his family. 48 hours to stop a conspiracy 5 years in the making. 48 hours to finish a war he'd thought he'd lost. The ambulance doors closed, and somewhere in Vermont, a 4-year-old boy with gray eyes looked out his window and asked his guardian when his daddy would come home. Soon, Jack promised silently. One way or another, Daddy's coming home soon. The medical facility at Fort Hamilton was state-of-the-art, but no amount of technology could repair 5 years of chemical damage to Jack's nervous system. He lay in the hospital bed watching the news coverage of his miraculous resurrection on the wall-mounted TV, while doctors ran test after test, confirming what he already knew: the paralysis was permanent and degenerative. Within a year, it would reach his arms. Within 2, his lungs. "Turn it off," he said to the nurse adjusting his IV. She reached for the remote, but before she could click it, a familiar face appeared on screen. David Chen, cleaned up and in a fresh Marine uniform, holding his daughter for the first time while Rebecca wept beside him. The reporter was calling it the reunion of the decade, but Jack saw the truth in David's eyes. 5 years of captivity had broken something in him that might never heal. "Major Morrison, The nurse's voice pulled him back. You have visitors. Elizabeth entered first changed from tactical gear into civilian clothes, but still carrying herself like someone ready for war. Behind her came Patterson Torres and, surprisingly, Rebecca Chen with her baby. We need to talk, Elizabeth said without preamble. About Phoenix, about what you really know. Jack glanced meaningfully at the nurse, who took the hint and left. Once the door closed, he pushed himself up in bed, his upper body still strong even as his legs lay useless beneath the hospital blanket. Phoenix isn't just a project, Jack began. It's a complete restructuring of global power. The chemical weapons in Syria were never meant to be deployed there. They were prototypes for something bigger. How much bigger? Patterson asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected. Every major city in the world, Jack said quietly. Sleeper cells with chemical weapons designed to look like terrorist attacks. Create global chaos, then step in with the solution, a new world government run by those who saw the chaos coming. Because they caused it, Elizabeth finished. My God, Jack, who's behind this? Jack hesitated, then pulled out his phone, showing them the message with the coordinates and deadline. In 46 hours, I'm supposed to meet them. Alone, or Michael dies. Elizabeth's composure cracked. How do they know about Michael? I've been so careful. Someone inside has been feeding them information, Jack said. Someone high up, someone we trust. That's impossible, Patterson protested. The only people who knew about this operation were... He stopped mid-sentence, his face going pale as the implications hit him. The only people who knew were in this room, plus a handful of officials at the highest levels of government. Detective Torres, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. The robbery wasn't random. The timing, the location, even which hostages they grabbed, it was all orchestrated. But not by Caruso. He was just another pawn. Rebecca shifted her baby to her other arm, her expression thoughtful. David said something when we talked earlier. He said Caruso kept asking about specific intelligence about chemical formulas and deployment methods. But David's a communications specialist. He wouldn't know that information. Unless someone thought he did, Jack said. Unless someone was using Caruso to gather intel while making it look like a trafficking operation. A double blind, Elizabeth breathed. Caruso thought he was running his own operation, but he was actually gathering intelligence for Phoenix. Jack nodded. And now that Caruso's in custody and the soldiers are free, Phoenix needs another way to get what they want. Hence the deadline. Hence the threat to Michael. We can't let you go alone, Patterson said firmly. It's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap, Jack agreed. But it's also an opportunity. They think I'm helpless, now paralyzed, broken. They're partially right. He looked down at his useless legs. But broken things can still be dangerous if you know how to use them. What are you proposing? Elizabeth asked. I go to the meeting, but not alone. Not obviously anyway. Jack turned to Torres. Detective, how good is NYPD's surveillance tech these days? Torres grinned for the first time since this mess started. Good enough to track a flea on a dog from a satellite. Why? Because we're going to need eyes everywhere without them knowing. Jack turned to Patterson. Colonel, those Marines who rescued the prisoners, can you keep them on standby without making it official? Already done, Patterson said. They're on training exercises for the next 72 hours. Convenient timing. Rebecca, Jack continued, turning to the woman whose family he'd inadvertently saved and destroyed. I need to ask you something difficult. David's communication expertise, he must have heard things during his captivity. Codes, frequencies, anything Phoenix might have used. Rebecca's jaw set with determination. David's already volunteered to help. Whatever these people did to him, he wants payback. We both do. It's dangerous, Jack warned. So was raising a baby alone thinking my husband was dead, Rebecca countered. I'm done being a victim. These people stole 5 years from my family. From all our families. Elizabeth moved to the window, looking out at the base where media vans were still gathered like vultures. They're using the publicity against us. Every move we make is being broadcast. How do we operate in secret when the whole world is watching? Jack smiled grimly. We don't operate in secret. We hide in plain sight. Let them think the paralyzed hero is having his moment in the sun. Meanwhile, he gestured to the others. You all have work to do. Over the next 36 hours, Jack gave carefully scripted interviews from his hospital bed, playing the role of the humble hero, uncomfortable with attention, The others moved pieces into place. Torres coordinated with NYPD's technical division, setting up surveillance networks around the coordinates Phoenix had provided in an abandoned warehouse in Queens that had once belonged to a chemical company. Patterson mobilized his Marines in small groups disguised as construction workers, homeless veterans, and delivery drivers, creating a perimeter that could close in minutes, but looked like normal city chaos. Elizabeth was the busiest of all, using her DIA resources to dig into every aspect of Phoenix, following money trails and communication patterns that led to increasingly disturbing conclusions. Jack, she said, entering his room at hour 38, her face pale with exhaustion and something else, fear. I found something. The chemical formula from Syria, the one that paralyzed you, it wasn't designed as a weapon. What do you mean? She handed him a tablet showing complex molecular diagrams. It's a control mechanism. In small doses, it causes temporary paralysis. In larger doses, permanent. But if you have the antidote, if you can control who gets paralyzed and who doesn't, you can control entire populations, Jack finished. Make them dependent on regular doses of the antidote to maintain mobility. He looked at his legs with new understanding. I'm not a casualty, I'm a test subject. The first successful test subject, Elizabeth corrected. Jack, your blood work shows antibodies no one else has. Your body's been fighting this chemical for 5 years. You might be the key to a universal antidote. Before Jack could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Hello, Major Morrison? The voice was electronically distorted, but somehow familiar. I trust you're preparing for our meeting. I'll be there, Jack said. Good, but there's been a change of plans. You'll bring Dr. Harper with you. We have questions only she can answer about her brother's research. Elizabeth's breath caught. My brother wasn't involved in... Lieutenant Michael Harper was brilliant, the voice interrupted. His work on neural inhibitors was groundbreaking. Shame he had to die before seeing it completed. Although, did he really die, Dr. Harper? Or is that another convenient fiction, like your husband's death? The line went dead. Elizabeth stared at the phone, then at Jack. They think Michael's alive. Or they know something we don't, Jack said. Liz, what research was Michael doing before Thunderstrike? She was quiet for a long moment. Classified medical research, something about neural pathway disruption and recovery. He said it could help paralyzed veterans walk again. Her eyes widened. Oh God, he was working on Phoenix, wasn't he, without knowing it? Jack reached for her hand. We need to go to that meeting, both of us. It's the only way to get answers. It's suicide, Patterson protested, having heard everything. They'll kill you both the moment they have what they want. Maybe, Jack agreed. Or maybe they need us alive. Elizabeth for her brother's research and me for my antibodies. Either way, we need to know who's behind this. The final 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jack was fitted with a specialized wheelchair, loaded with hidden compartments, weapons, communication devices, and one special surprise Elizabeth had arranged. She'd also prepared something else, a visit from their son. Michael Harper Morrison, 4 years old with his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, stood in the doorway of the hospital room, clutching a stuffed bear, staring at the man in the bed he'd only seen in photographs. Are you my daddy? He asked in a small voice. Jack's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, I'm your daddy. The boy approached slowly, cautiously, then suddenly rushed forward and hugged Jack's arm. Mommy said you were keeping us safe. Are the bad people gone now? Almost, Jack said, holding his son for the first time, memorizing his smell, the feel of his small body, the way he fit perfectly in his arms. Daddy has one more thing to do, then the bad people will be gone. Promise, Michael asked. Jack met Elizabeth's eyes over their son's head. I promise. After Michael was taken back to the safe house, Elizabeth and Jack prepared for the meeting. She pushed his wheelchair to a specially modified van, both of them wired with enough surveillance equipment to broadcast everything to the teams waiting in position. Whatever happens, Jack said as they drove toward Queens, protect Michael. He's all that matters. We matter, Elizabeth corrected. Our family matters. Don't you dare make another martyrdom play, Jack Morrison. You've died once already. Our son deserves a father, even one in a wheelchair. The warehouse loomed before them, abandoned and decrepit windows, broken walls covered in graffiti. But Jack's trained eye caught the subtle signs: too clean, Tire tracks, security cameras disguised as broken fixtures, the electromagnetic signature of serious hardware inside. Elizabeth pushed his wheelchair up the ramp someone had conveniently installed. The door opened before they could knock. The man standing there made them both freeze. "Hello, Jack? Elizabeth?" Lieutenant Michael Harper smiled, very much alive, despite being dead for 3 years. "Welcome to Phoenix. We have so much to discuss." Elizabeth's legs nearly buckled. "Michael, but how they said you were executed?" "A necessary fiction," Michael said, stepping aside to let them enter. "Just like Jack's death. Just like so many lies told in service of a greater truth." The warehouse interior had been converted into a sophisticated command center. Screens covered the walls showing news feeds from around the world, chemical formulas, deployment schedules. And standing in the center like a spider in an electronic web was someone Jack had trusted with his life countless times. "Hello, Major." President Catherine Walsh said, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States turned architect of global catastrophe. "I believe you've figured out most of it by now. You always were too smart for your own good." Jack's hands tightened on his wheelchair's arms. "Madam President, I should have known. The only person with enough power to coordinate all of this to move pieces on both sides of the board." "Don't look so shocked," Walsh said, approaching them with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. "The world is failing, Jack. Democracy, capitalism, the entire system, it's all crumbling. Climate change, resource depletion, overpopulation. We need radical change, and radical change requires radical action." "Like paralyzing entire populations," Elizabeth demanded. "Like holding them hostage with the chemical weapons. Like creating a controllable crisis that justifies a new world order," Walsh corrected. "The chemicals are just tools. Fear is the real weapon. Fear of paralysis, fear of helplessness. People will accept any authority that promises to keep them mobile functional." Michael stepped forward and Jack noticed he was limping slightly. "The paralysis agent isn't permanent if treated quickly. I've developed an antidote that can reverse the effects within 72 hours of exposure. After that," he looked at Jack's legs, "after that, it's irreversible." "You experimented on your own brother-in-law." Elizabeth's voice was thick with disgust. "Jack volunteered," Michael said defensively. "He just didn't know it. Every mission he ran, every chemical exposure was calculated. We needed to understand long-term effects." Jack laughed bitterly. "The 12 soldiers, they were test subjects, too. Unwilling ones," Walsh admitted, "but their sacrifice will save millions. Once Phoenix is implemented, wars will end, resources will be distributed fairly, population will be controlled humanely." "Through fear and paralysis," Jack said. "That's not salvation. It's slavery." "It's survival," Walsh countered. "In 6 hours, the first wave begins. Major cities worldwide will experience terrorist attacks using the paralysis agent. Governments will fall, panic will spread, and then like a phoenix from the ashes, a new coalition government will emerge with the antidote, with the solution with me at its head." "The other world leaders they don't know?" Elizabeth asked. Walsh smiled. "Some suspect, others are complicit, most are irrelevant. Once their populations are paralyzed, they will have no choice but to cooperate." Jack looked around the command center, counting guards, exits, weapons. "You brought us here to gloat. I brought you here to offer you a choice," Walsh said. "Join Phoenix, your expertise, Elizabeth's research, Michael's medical knowledge. Together you could help shape the new world. Your son could grow up in a paradise instead of a dying planet." "A paradise built on paralyzed bodies," Jack said. "No thanks," Walsh sighed. "I expected as much. Heroes are so predictable." She nodded to the guards. "Take them to the holding area. Once the attacks begin, they'll either cooperate or watch their son become patient zero for the next phase of testing." The guards moved forward, but Jack smiled. "You know what your problem is, Walsh? You think paralysis makes someone helpless." He pressed a hidden button on his wheelchair's arm. The modified frame exploded outward, not with destructive force, but with a directed electromagnetic pulse that Elizabeth had installed. Every electronic device in the warehouse died instantly: computers, lights, communications, and most importantly, the containment systems for the chemical weapons stored in the facility. "Did you really think I'd come here without a plan?" Jack asked in the sudden darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alarms blared as chemical containment protocols failed. The guards reached for their weapons, but Jack was already moving. The wheelchair, freed from its electronic components, revealed its true nature. A mechanical exoskeleton designed for his upper body, giving him mobility and strength despite his paralyzed legs. Elizabeth pulled her concealed weapon, covering Jack as he rolled toward the main computer terminal. "Michael, help us! This is madness!" Her brother stood frozen, torn between family and ideology. "The world needs change, Liz. We can't keep going like this." "Not like this," she pleaded. "Not through fear and control. That's not change. It's just another form of tyranny." Outside, they could hear vehicles approaching Patterson's Marines, Torres, and the NYPD, all responding to the signal from Jack's EMP. Walsh pulled her own weapon, pointing it at Jack. "You've doomed the world, Morrison. Without Phoenix, humanity has maybe 50 years left." "Then we'll make those 50 years count," Jack said, his hands flying over the manual controls, initiating a complete system purge. "We'll find another way, a better way, one that doesn't require turning people into prisoners in their own bodies." Walsh pulled the trigger, but Michael threw himself between them, taking the bullet meant for Jack. He collapsed, blood spreading across his chest. "Michael!" Elizabeth screamed, rushing to her brother. Jack continued working even as guards closed in. The purge was almost complete, years of Phoenix research and about to be destroyed. But Walsh had one more card to play. "Stop or your son dies," she said, holding up a phone showing video of Michael's safe house. "One word from me and the house is flooded with the paralysis agent." Jack's hands froze. Around them, the warehouse shook as Marines breached the outer doors. They had seconds before everything erupted into chaos. "You're bluffing," Jack said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Walsh smiled coldly. "You have 10 seconds to decide. Save the data and your son lives. Destroy it and he's paralyzed for life. Choose hero." Elizabeth looked up from her brother, who was breathing but badly hurt. "Jack, she's won. We can't risk Michael." Jack closed his eyes, seeing his son's face, feeling those small arms around him. Then he opened them, steel gray and resolute. "You're right, Walsh. I am predictable." His hands moved to complete the purge. "I predictably choose to believe in humanity's better nature, and I predictably refuse to let my son grow up in a world built on fear." He hit the final key. The entire Phoenix database began deleting itself, years of research vanishing into digital oblivion. Walsh screamed in rage and pulled the trigger again, but this time Jack was ready. He twisted in the exoskeleton, the bullet sparking off the metal frame. The Marines burst through the door, weapons trained on everyone. "Nobody move," Patterson's voice boomed. But Walsh was already running, heading for a hidden exit. She made it 3 steps before Detective Torres appeared from the shadows, his weapon trained on her. "Madam President, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and about 100 other charges we'll sort out later." "You can't arrest a sitting president," Walsh protested. "Watch me," Torres said, slapping cuffs on her wrists. "Besides, I don't think you'll be president much longer once this gets out." As Walsh was led away, Jack rolled to where Elizabeth cradled her brother. Michael was pale but conscious, pressing his hand to the wound. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I thought we were saving the world." "You still can," Jack said. "The antidote you developed, it can help the people already affected. That's real salvation, Michael. Not through control, but through healing." Paramedics rushed in, taking Michael away on a stretcher. Elizabeth stood covered in her brother's blood and looked at the destroyed computer systems. "It's over," she said. "Phoenix is dead." "This version of it," Jack corrected. "But Walsh was right about one thing: the world does need change. Real change. The kind that comes from people working together, not being forced together." His phone buzzed. Patterson's text was brief. "Safe house secure. Your son is safe. No chemical agents present." Walsh was bluffing. Jack showed it to Elizabeth, who collapsed against him in relief. She was bluffing the whole time. "No," Jack said quietly. "She was testing me, seeing if I'd sacrifice my son for the greater good. The same test I failed 5 years ago when I chose 2 million strangers over 12 of my men." "You didn't fail," Elizabeth said firmly. "You made an impossible choice. Both times." As they emerged from the warehouse, the morning sun was rising over Queens, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. News vans were already arriving, the story of the century about to break wide open. "What now?" Elizabeth asked. Jack looked down at his paralyzed legs, then at the exoskeleton that gave him mobility, then at his wife's face. "Now we go home, we pick up our son, and we figure out how to be a family. A real family, not hidden in shadows or built on lies." And Phoenix. Phoenix was about rising from ashes, Jack said. But sometimes you don't need to burn everything down to build something new. Sometimes you just need to remember what's worth fighting for. 6 months later, Jack Morrison sat in his modified wheelchair in a different kind of command center, a research facility dedicated to treating paralysis victims from the Phoenix chemical attacks. The attacks Walsh had planned never happened, but there were still victims from the Syria tests, from Caruso's operations, from various Phoenix experiments around the world. Michael Harper recovered from his gunshot wound and, granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation, worked alongside his sister to develop better antidotes. Detective Torres, promoted to chief of detectives, regularly visited to update them on the ongoing trials. Patterson, now a general, ensured military resources supported their research. David Chen and his family had moved to the city, where he worked as a counselor for other veterans who'd been held captive. His daughter, now talking, called Jack Uncle Wheels and loved rides on his motorized chair. But the best moments were the quiet ones. Elizabeth reading research papers while Jack played with their son. Michael asking endless questions about everything, his curious mind already showing signs of his parents' intelligence. The three of them together, no longer hiding, no longer running. "Daddy," Michael said one evening, climbing carefully onto Jack's lap, mindful of his father's paralyzed legs, "are the bad people all gone now?" Jack thought about Walsh awaiting trial in federal prison, about the Phoenix conspirators being rounded up worldwide, about the chemical weapons being destroyed under international supervision, about the long road still ahead to heal the damage done. "Most of them, buddy," he said honestly, "and the ones that are left, we're watching them." "Good," Michael said, snuggling against his father's chest. "Because heroes watch out for people, right?" "Right," Jack agreed, meeting Elizabeth's eyes over their son's head. "Heroes watch out for people." Outside their window, New York City bustled with life, unaware of how close it had come to catastrophe. The world kept spinning, imperfect, but free, messy, but magnificent. And in a small apartment in Manhattan, a family that had been broken apart by lies and sacrifice finally found their way home to each other. Jack Morrison might never walk again, but he'd learned something more important than mobility. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay still, stay present, and hold on to what matters most. The phoenix of their family had risen not from ashes of destruction, but from the embers of hope that even 5 years of separation couldn't fully extinguish. In the end, that was the real victory. Not that conspiracy stopped or the world saved, but three people choosing to trust each other again, choosing love over fear, choosing to build something new from the pieces of what was broken. The war was over. The healing could finally begin. What an incredible journey we've shared today. Jack Morrison's story reminds us that true heroism isn't about being invincible. It's about choosing to act despite our limitations, choosing love despite our losses, and choosing hope despite our fears. From a homeless veteran in a wheelchair to a man who saved the world while paralyzed, Jack proved that strength comes not from our bodies, but from our choices. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes don't always stand tall. Sometimes they roll forward in wheelchairs, carrying the weight of impossible decisions and the hope for redemption. What did you think of Jack's journey? Could you have made the same impossible choices? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing how these stories impact you. Remember to ring that notification bell so you never miss our next story. Tomorrow we'll bring you another tale of courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Until then, remember, we all have the capacity to be someone's hero. Sometimes it's in grand gestures that save the world, but more often it's in small acts of courage, helping a stranger, standing up for what's right, or simply refusing to give up when life knocks us down. Thank you for being part of our story family. Keep believing in heroes, especially the ones who don't wear capes but push forward on wheels. Stay strong, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.